Hello, hello, and welcome to something a little bit different. I've decided to try something new. Normally, I read out podfics, and as you guys probably know, I also write fic sometimes. And I've decided, since, like the classic fanfiction author, I have a million work in progresses that I will never actually get around to working on. And I love writing and I love talking about writing and I love talking about my own ideas and the writing process in general is really interesting to me. I thought I would go through some of my old fic ideas that are just collecting dust and, read through what I have, give any thoughts I have on the ideas, the process from what I can remember for some of these old fics, how maybe with these old fics, my writing process for ideas and ideation, all that has changed, just that sort of thing. So you get a little hint at a story that will never exist, but whirled around in my brain for a little bit. And you also get some of my thoughts about writing and such. Not sure if this will be any good or any interesting, but I decided I'd try it out. So, the first fic that I'm going to be sharing with you ever, that's first fic outline, I guess, that I'm going to be sharing with you, is a My Hero Academia fic, and it is called Dragons Hoard Much More Than Gold. Though its, I guess, working title is not quite what I would use. I guess we're already into how I organize things. So how I organize things, I have the fandom acronym. Then I have, if I have a title name, I have the title name. And then in brackets, I have more of a general short summary of what this fic idea is. So if it's been like a year since I've come up with something, the title may not actually be that descriptive, but in the brackets, it just lays it out, so it's much more likely to trigger my memory. And this one is just Dragon Experiment. It says pretty much all there is needed to trigger my own memory on this. So I'm going to be going through the document. So this is a older fic idea, and it's in an older organization style I have. So like the headings I have are outline, overview, info, brainstorm, characters, which is much different than what I currently have. But I'm going to start out with the overview, which is more of a general summary of what the idea is, which is get into UA, go for a week, get kidnapped, get dragonified, go feral, get rescued, get mostly unferal, come to terms, move into UA, recover. Yeah, that's all that's there. It's not the most descriptive. You can kind of see why I've changed things a lot of how I organize stuff. But we're moving into my brainstorm, which is a little bit rough to read. How I used to brainstorm is it's literally no periods, all commas for like how big is this chunk? It's like 700 words of just brick of paragraph, but it's because how I brainstorm is a lot of stream of consciousness. So it's just write, get all the ideas down on page. So, punctuation doesn't matter, spelling doesn't matter, just go. So it's a little not the best to digest. I've changed my ways. I've repented. But so I'm going to be going through this. So yes, this is the brainstorming, and I don't really delete things, so the things said at the beginning might be completely different than some of the ideas at the end, though I don't think that is the case for this fic. I think it is more, I didn't work on it in too many sittings, so it's generally the same ideas from start to finish. But okay. So, brainstorm. 1A is captured. After a week of school. Whoops, All for One, better push back your plans a month. A group that knows All for One was experimenting on how to give quirks. They had perfected a single artificial quirk that they could transfer. They wanted this big batch as a proper sample size before moving on to other quirks. and also because the nature of the quirk, they thought they could control kids to be their own personal army. How fun, we always love some just horrible people in fics. And yeah, I am going to be interjecting in more of a speaking voice, I guess, is how you can tell that I'm interjecting my ideas versus more of a narration voice. But yeah, the ideas are not deep. When I make fic ideas, brainstorms at the beginning, it is just what do I want to happen? Any actual motivations and character depth happen way later, which tends to not happen for a lot of fic ideas. You can get there. You can start off with shallow thinking and deepen it as you go. As long as you're having fun, you're on a roll. Anything, make it now. You can make it better later. That's the idea with this. Anyway, so yeah. Their own personal army of what? Of dragons. It's a dragon quirk that lets the user turn into a dragon. Which type depends on their pre-existing quirk and appearance. Their human form also gains minor mutations that reflect their other form. Horns, patches of scales, eyes, tongues, claws. They also have dragon instincts, which is what the villains were banking on for turning them into their army. They have heavy pack dynamics. They prioritize the safety of the pack over their own. They hoard, including people they like, which is kind of where the title of this fic comes from, I'm pretty sure. The villains were using an altered version of Trigger to heighten these instincts and dull their human ones. It's a big thing for UA, who put everything into finding their missing class. They finally do, just as the term is set to start, but the damage has been done. The process was perfected after all. They were dragons within the first week, and having been living in this drugged, instinct-run state for weeks, with rarely changing back, they've been living as a flock. The adults are distressed when they find them. At first, they're like, the fuck are these dragons? Then they corner one, where the only escape is a person-sized door, and they transform. Izuku. Into a human with their altered features, and fit through the door before changing back. It's a massive shock. They knew this group was dabbling in human experimentation, but this? They're feral and don't seem human. They're debating what to do while corralling them for a while until some heroes find the lab notes and it's revealed that they've been drugged, which is both a relief and not. The drugs will last a long time in their systems, so they can't exactly wait it out for fear someone will attack them or the kids will escape into the wilderness. Erasure only stops the breath attacks and prevents them from transforming. Quirk suppressants will probably get them back to human, though. But they'd have to be all darted, or it'd have to be airborne. They decide on airborne, plus Midnight's quirk to knock them out. It works. They're taken to UA and placed in beds in the same room upon Nezu's advice about their displayed pack behavior. When they wake up, they're no longer under the brunt of the drugs, but they've left their mark in heightened and new instincts above normal levels. The kids are freaked out and confused. The past month was a daze, and they don't know each other, but they feel attached and have vague memories of events and dynamics. Aizawa stays with them to supervise all the first day. At first, the dragons are tense at the stranger to their flock, especially one that hurt them, but he's able to answer questions. Some vaguely remember he was their homeroom teacher. He confirms and says that he will continue to be, just under different circumstances due to their event. Some like Bakugo protest, but Aizawa explains and they settle down. They spend a week at UA while things are sorted out. Aizawa is with them quite often, all throughout school hours at least. Their parents briefly visit, and reunions are tearful. It's decided that the 20 of them will move into the dorms on UA, both to monitor them and keep them from getting unwanted attention, mainly in the getting kidnapped again category. But also, being apart from at least one flock member has been extremely distressing for all the teens, so they get to stick together. The teens are scared that changing back into dragons will make them feral and forget who they are again. The teachers have their work cut out for them on helping them become comfortable with this new part of themselves. So that was the brainstorm, and I did notice a few things that do slightly change from this brainstorm to the rough outline that I wrote. And also, I think the timeline was not exactly set for when the kidnapping is happening and all that, which is something that I changed later. I love my timelines. I add a timeline section to my planning documents so I get beautiful, beautiful timelines. I love them. But I do not currently have this at this point. And also at this point, as you can see, the brainstorm is less scattershot ideas and more, like I said, stream of consciousness. It's a vague direction, play-by-play of the plot, which again does change in later outlines, and I feel it works much better not having it like this. But this was how all of my initial ideas work. This is years old, I think, at this point. Maybe 2 years old. So yeah, it has been a while. But as you can see, you kind of get the idea for the story, which I love, animal transformation kind of fic. So I love transformation quirks, and I'm a big fan of animalistic behavior, pack dynamics, that sort of thing. I think it's really fun. The extra bond you can get. There's a lot to explore. So that's probably why I decided to write this. For some things, they don't tend to end up being the best ideas, but for some things it's not I have a story idea. It's more I like this collection of tropes. I want to think of something where I can put down my general feelings about these tropes and what kinds of things I like the most. I don't stop myself. I'm not this is going to be a bad idea, I'm not going to write it down. I write everything down. You never know when something you thought was going to be you writing for 10 minutes because, what's my take on this cliche leads to, oh God, what is the document at right now? There's a specific fic that I thought was going to be, because it is such a cliche. I'm not gonna say over this. I might talk about it at some point, but it's one that I think I might actually write. That I did not. I thought it was gonna be 10 minutes, maybe. The planning section is 17,000 words. The rough draft section is 22,000 words. Those are separate sections. And oh my God, the timeline. I made an entire calendar, in a Canva kind of thing, so I can see the whole month laid out, and then day to day. My God, I love timelines. I'm getting so off topic. Let me go back to the dragon story. But so yeah. Dragons, I love them, and you never know when an idea is going to actually be really great. This one was more of just, I like dragons, I like transformation, let me write down an idea that can have pack dynamics and all that sort of stuff. And it's a fun idea. It didn't end up going anywhere, but sometimes it will. So don't limit yourself if you think it's not going to be worthwhile, because if it isn't worthwhile, you still got to have fun brainstorming something, even if it's just going to sit there forever. Anyway. I do have one last little separate paragraph for some reason in the brainstorm section. It's just something happens where Deku and maybe their whole class revert back to their dragon instincts, but they're separated and all flock to their natural habitat and look for their pack. The humans, teachers, pros, class B, big three, have to find them and bring them home. So that's not connected to the general plot flow of the other brainstorm bit, but I do remember it was something I had an interesting time thinking about. Because this fic, again, it's less plot and it's more dragon. So I had a fun time thinking about what each student's dragon form would be and what maybe natural habitat kind of thing they would have. So that's fun, and that is in the next section with the character section. Because I came up with, I I think every single character has at least something about their dragon design. Some are a lot more thought out than others, and I do actually have art for this. Yes, I'm never going to post this anywhere. I'm never actually going to write it, but I did do art. I did 3 sketchbook pages for 3 different dragon designs and 1 colored digital illustration. I will like have those attached somewhere, like links or just like embedded pictures, that kind of thing. So you can see them if you'd like. But I will mention like who's who when I get to it. So, characters. At the top, I have relationships, like familial relationships, who knows who before things start. And I have Aizawa and Namori know Tenya through Tensei, and Momo is Namori's niece. Like, classic general fan-in kind of realm of how do characters possibly know each other. Just throw a couple in there for the extra wump potential. And then on to the dragons. So, they all have slitted eyes where there's almost no white showing. As adolescents, these are fluffy dragons. They have second eyelids. They are on average about the size of a big rhino, though they can be as small as a grizzly bear or as large as an elephant. And in my document, I included, just pictures plucked off Google of size references of humans compared to these animals, so it helped me with visualization. In human form, if their emotions get heightened or something brings out their instincts, their dragon traits can increase, like scales spreading across skin or eyes slitting. They can make dragon noises. So, on to the characters. Izuku. And in parentheses, I have names that I thought the dragons would call each other when they have, amnesia and they don't know what's going on. Who am I? What? Who are you? So they just come up with simple word names for each other. And Izuku, of course, is Bush. So he has deep forest green scales with speckles of black that look like freckles, because you gotta have the freckles. Cyan tipped wings on top. A long tail that spends most of its time curled around his legs, a mane of curly green fur around his neck and head, and down the spine of his tail and onto his chest, on the smaller side, like a grizzly bear. So, walking through a bit of my thought process with the design. So, of course, you gotta have the fluffy hair for Izuku. And like I said, these are like fuzzy dragons. They do have scales, but a lot of them also have fuzz, because furry dragons are just, I want to pet them more because they're fluffy. Fluffy is always good. So like the long tail. So Izuku, he's green. He's got like a lot of cyan in his costume. So add that to the green to add an element of, different color interest design-wise. And the long tail, I was thinking, who's green? Where are they going to live? Probably trees. He's a bush. He hides in the tree leaves and just blinks at you. Monkeys live in the trees, they got long tails, so he's got a prehensile tail. And the fluff on top, so it means that if he wraps his tail around a tree, the fluff is showing and it kind of looks like it's just, moss or weird leaves, really weird leaves. But that's the kind of thing, the kind of ideas going into his design. It's just fun to design things sometimes and just think about them, even if you're not going to use them. And so as a human, he has scale freckles, sharp teeth and ears, and his hair floofs when in emotion, like a Ghibli character. So like I said before, the humans have some traits of the dragons, and I tried to choose like a handful of different ones for each character, spread it out so it's not all the same. I love the scale freckles. Sometimes it's hard not giving characters the thing you like just a bunch of times because, it's good to have variation. So, Quirk. He has one for all, so there's that. When he channels it, his scales take on an iridescent sheen, shining with the rainbow of the previous user's colors. He's fast and strong, and energy writhes around him. He doesn't have any breath attack. He's a forest dragon. Tall trees and vines, claws made for tree climbing, main transport mode, Dark undersides of wings that look like the darker shadows of trees. Fur the color of leaves. On places seen from below, like chest and neck. Also on head, when looking down they blend in more. Also on the top of the tail, so when wrapping around tree branches, just the fur is seen, like I was mentioning earlier. I actually wrote that down. Forgot I wrote that down. Before hunting, we'll roll around in fallen green leaves, so some get tangled in fur to provide extra camouflage. Mostly green to blend in with trees, but limbs tinged brown to resemble tree branches. Because he doesn't have a quirk factor, the new quirk doesn't base his form on any pre-existing quirk, despite one for all being there, and absorbs it into its mass, like before. His body isn't built for his quirk. So that is all about Izuku. This will be me just going through dragon designs for a little bit before I get to the outline, which is more of like a, plot going through beat by beat, just not written out like a novel. So you can skip to that if you're not interested in a bunch of dragon designs. But so Izuku is one of the ones I did some art for. So I did do a page, so it's a full body and a headshot of the dragon and a headshot of Izuku with, scales and stuff. And he is also the one I did the colored digital art for, which was fun. And I think it turned out pretty decent. I do like the way he looked in the sketch better, but it was still fun. Anyway, on to Ochako, who is also someone I did do an art page in my sketchbook for. So Ochako, or Float, as the dragons would call her. She's a pink dragon with white patterning and black horns. No wings, but can still fly. White stomach, breath attack, which is 0G mist. Basically pixie dust, but you can't control where you fly. And she's the size of a white rhino. As a human, she would have scale blush, like instead of freckles, it's right around her cheeks, which would be a pinky scales, and she has white horns. She's a mountain dragon. She lives so high up in the air that it's thin. Less air means it's harder to fly with wings, so they adapted to 0G. Is that scientifically backed? I did not research for this one. I do sometimes do a lot of research and be very, very specific, but other times I'm just doing what I want, which is not research, but a lot of the time what I want is research. But anyway, this time it was not. Anyway. Had many ombre fins, or has many ombre fins, to change direction in the air. White belly with quick ombre to pastel pink to blend in with clouds at sunset, which would be more of a diurnal kind of, what is it? The clock? Internal clock thing? Whatever. The back is a darker color, speckled pink to brown black, to better blend in with mountainside below. Scales on the belly are hard for lying on mountains, fur on neck and shoulders, haunches with tail for more warmth, more like downy feathers that don't get wet, for, the high up altitude being colder. Sharp teeth, but blunt claws for walking, tail fins and body fins for steering. Now, for me, a lot of the fun about dragons is their wings, but like I said, sometimes you make choices which aren't maybe your favorite thing, but to add some spice, some variety. And out of all of the dragons, there were only a few where I was like, yeah, this makes sense for their character. And Ochako, her quirk being float, it wouldn't make sense for a dragon who has zero gravity abilities, but also just has wings. So I figured this was a pretty good, way to make both of those ideas work. And then Tsu is next, which is actually the third and final dragon I did an art page for. Yeah, a bit surprising. She's a fun character, but she's not one of my favorites. But I don't know, I felt inspired when I was coming up with her design. So Tsu would be called Algae by the other dragons. She's more of a Chinese dragon style, not Western dragon. Long and slim and without wings, though can hop on the air to travel. Green, shiny mane going along her length, made to swim with a strong tail almost half of her length. Dark black eyes, stout nose with whiskers. Thick as a grizzly, but torso long as a rhino. Tongue like a frog's, can cling to most surfaces and camouflage. As a human, she has scales along her shoulders, plus ones right by teardrop eye locations. Like if you've read Wings of Fire, like the what are they called again? The black dragons, like Moon, who have that ability. That's where the teardrop kind of scales I'm thinking of would be. Anyway, and also slit eyes and dragony ears. She would be a swamp dragon. Long wingless body to twist around underwater tree roots. Small arms and legs, but long and powerful tail, like a tadpole, to swim. Sticky, and can climb trees to sunbathe and wait for prey to wander into view, to shoot out their tongue. Small, duller teeth due to swallowing food whole. Mane looks like swamp algae for camouflage. Webbed feet can jump on water, including water vapor, and essentially walk through the air, or fly if it's humid enough, or raining. Minor camouflage by refracting water. So that was me trying to incorporate her quirk into it more, because Izuku, he doesn't have the quirk factor, so I could do whatever I wanted for him. But for all the others, I tried to really think about how a dragon might have their quirk and how that would work with their environment and stuff. And then we're on to Shoto, who would be referred to as Frostburn by the dragons. Half red, half white dragon, of course. 2 straight horns, ice and fire breath. Patch of blackened red scales around red side eye. Large wings made for intimidation. African elephant size. As a human, he would have dual horns, and when he huffs, frost and fire comes out of his nose. Slit eyes and scales along his jaw and neck area. He would be a fire/ice dragon. And for a lot of these dragon descriptions, I wrote them as if they were real dragons and not just their quirk interacting with an artificial quirk, because it was just more fun to write it that way. So, due to unnatural breeding with no regards for compatibility, there is no natural environment for this dragon. Tundra dragons live in the ice mountains of the Arctic, while volcano dragons live around active volcanoes. The closest thing would be one of the few volcanoes in the Arctic. The volcanic half has thicker red scales, with small gaps to vent heat, smoke filtering second eyelid, and flares their wings for intimidation. Arctic dragons have glimmering white iridescent scales that resemble the gleam of fresh snow. They have sharp claws and spikes along their body, tail tip and joints as well, to help with purchase on the ice. And then we have Tenya next. And these descriptions get a lot shorter after this. It's less actual thought out what species of dragon this would be, and more just general descriptions. A few I was inspired to write more, but like I said, I didn't spend too much time actually on this fic idea. And when it is just coming up with ideas for a laundry list of characters, it can get a little bit boring. And this is all for fun. Not going to force myself to write more when I don't have any ideas. So Tenya would be called Swift by the other dragons, a sleek navy dragon, silver short head spines and glasses scale pattern, short ridge spines going along his spine, bulky legs, powerful wings, very fast, no breath attack, and a unicorn rhino sides, which I think is a specific type of rhino. Anyway, as a human, he would have an under eye scale pattern, upper spine ridges, dragony ears, more resembling mer ears, mermaid ears, if you know what I'm talking about. Darkened hands, the color of his scales, with some small scales spattered about. And then we're on to Shinso, because of course this is a universe where Mineta doesn't exist, because fuck him. Shinso is my favorite, and Mineta sucks. So we have Shinso, who the dragons would call Haze. He's a deep lavender color with patches of lighter fur like a mane and at the joints. His breath attack is that you hear him roar, and if you even so much as flinch, you're under his control. He has a twisting crown of horns and a long, almost capture weapon-like tail. Now again, that isn't interacting with his quirk, as I've stated is the main way the dragon designs are made, but I can have fun. You can have fun. Nobody cares. It's fan fiction. This is for fun. And then as a human, he has sharper teeth and claws, black sclera, and scales by his outer eyes. And then we're on to Momo, who would be called Ebony by the other dragons. Hello, my name is Ebony, Darkness Dimension Ravenwhite. Anyway, she's a coal black dragon with slicked back horns. Her breath attack is just her being able to create things out of her mouth. Probably more actual breath attacks and not just, here you go, Russian nesting doll attack. And she has kind of her ponytail shaped as horns. And as a human, she has neck scales, scales going across her forehead like a crown because she is a queen. Obviously, she's the best. She has horns and slit eyes. And then onto Jiro, who would be called Tenor by the other dragons. She has indigo scales, horns that hang down more, enhanced hearing, and a sonic breath attack. She's about the size of a polar bear and has a forked tongue. As a human, she also has a forked tongue, which I think she would probably think is sick. She has some spattering of face scales, claws, and her ear tips are just a little bit pointy. And this is one where I thought about dragon species, and she would be a cave dragon. Evolved smaller to dwell in caves, prehensile tail with spikes to secure body to stalactites to sleep. Sensitive to vibrations in the cave walls to sense prey and predator. Attracts mates via musical displays. Preys on fish in bodies of water close to their caves. Sharp teeth for fishing. And I will admit, I'm pretty sure some of the inspiration for habitat, features and behaviors, there we go, is from Night Furies, specifically because of the sonar kind of thing Toothless can do. And I love How to Train Your Dragon. I love dragons. This is the whole thing about dragons. And I've been speaking about dragons for half an hour. I love dragons. And I all up to date. Well, back in the day, I was very up to date about all the theories about Night Furies and dragon habitats. I consumed so much content, beyond canon content, but not fan fiction. I did not really know fan fiction existed back in the day. Well, the first thing of fan fiction that I read when I didn't actually know what fan fiction was, it was on Tumblr. And I'm like, what? This is a story about it, but it's not it. But it was a dead dove, do not eat kind of thing. And I was 14 or something, or 13. And I wanted to read because I'd never seen content like this. I'd never seen fan fiction, but I didn't want to read that. And I stopped, and I should have stopped sooner. Poor child me. Anyway, back to dragons. I love dragons. We're on to Sero, who would be called Web by the other dragons. He's a sleek black dragon with patches of gray, on his elbows. He has, web, which would be mimicking tape breath attack, long white tail, claws for climbing, toothless, head things. Toothless has the, weird little ear nubby things. He would have those. And he's the size of a polar bear. And as a human, he would have the claws, the teeth. He would have a split tongue. And you would have darkened hands and a few speckling of scales like Tenya. And he would have scales on his cheekbones. And then we have Mina, who would be called Acid by the other dragons. She's a bubblegum pink dragon, of course, with large twisting yellow horns, a mane of pink curly hair on her head, sharp yellow claws, acid breath, of course, large powerful wings, and about the size of a woolly rhino. And as a human, she would have scales on her arms, her nose, and she would have more dragon-resembling horns than her normal horns. Then we're on to Kirishima, who would be called Boulder by the other dragons. He's red-scaled, built like a truck, large wings, strong scales that can be hardened, no breath attack, about the size of an elephant, some black scales at the ends of limbs, and a long, spiked, dragony spine, wicked claws, about the size of an African elephant, and those are big. And as a human, he would have scales on his face and down his arms. He would have the horns, dragony slit eyes, and claws. Then we're on to Denki, who would be called Charge by the other dragons. A fluffy electric yellow dragon with black streaks throughout. More of a, Chinese dragon style, but not as long and with wings. You would have an electric breath attack and can static up his whole body, which gets really poofy. That's adorable to think about. And he's about the size of a grizzly bear. And as a human, he would have the thing like Izuku does where hair floofs up with emotion, Ghibli style. He has dragony slit eyes, he has the dragon ears, and scale freckles. And this is one I thought about dragon species, so he'd be a lightning dragon, a subspecies that lives high on mountains where thunderstorms occur frequently. Habitat can also be human power plants. They slip in and set up a den in a corner. They're small to fit into places like that and caves up on mountains. They have spines and spikes along their body to catch electricity that they can flatten. Their tail is full of these little lightning rods, and that can be used to control and, again, flatten or extend them. And they sleep with their tail in their mouth to keep a complete circuit, just because that's an adorable thought. And they absorb electricity from external sources, like power plants or natural, storms, when they are low on their own natural electricity. But they also need to discharge if they have excess. And due to these dragons being actually helpful to humans, they are welcomed into most power plants. This symbiotic relationship leads to a more social species of dragon with humans. And again, it's written like this is a dragon universe, when that's not really what this is, but it could be, It can be nice to write things in ways that leave it open, that if you have a different idea in the future, that you can come back and use previous ideas if they fit the scenario. Anyway, on to Katsuki now, who would be called Blast by the other dragons. He's black and orange scales, spiky horns, buff dragon, wicked claws, and explosive breath attack. And the size of an extinct elephant species, because those ones are the big ones, I'm pretty sure. As a human, he would have the claws, the slit eyes, face and arm scales, and the sharp teeth. And he would be a volcano dragon. Bulky, magma-resistant scales with small gaps for explosive fluid to gather. Can make it pop for intimidation too, little popping sounds. Can shoot out an explosive liquid that they can detonate when they close their mouth and stop the flow. They use this to terraform volcanoes and guide the magma to where they want it. Useful for making dens, and they're excellent homemakers and even cook their food. They have strong front legs to move these terraformed rock chunks. Which is, I love the idea that, Katsuki would be this huge, kind of scary dragon, but in, the natural environment, they're out here making a nice home, cooking their food, because that is also kind of Katsuki. He goes to bed on time. We love a man who can cook. Anyway, on to Aoyama, who would be called Shimmer by the other dragons. He has glittery white scales with a blonde horse-like mane along his spine, leading to a fluffy little piece on his tail. He would be polar bear-sized, with yellow claws and horns. He would have a light beam breath attack, so beam of light. And I think I stated twice for some reason that he was polar bear-sized. And anyway, as a human, he would have scales, so many shiny, sparkly scales. He would love it. And he would also have claws. Then we are on to Sato, who would be called Impact by the other dragons. He would have bark brown scales, big buff dragon, large wings. He would have no breath attack, but he would have a strong head with straight goat-like horns, for ramming people. And he would be about the size of an African elephant. As a human, he would retain the horns, the ears, and extra like scales around his ears, probably going in on over his cheekbones, leading down. Then we're on to Odoro, who the other dragons would call Swing. He is a furry yellow dragon, a long and strong tail with, the extra little floof bit on the tip. He would have a boxy snoot, no breath attack, and be the size of a unicorn rhino. As a human, he would retain the ears, extra fur along his tail going all the way up his spine, like to his back, and he would have cheek scales. And he would be a jungle dragon. Tan, scaled body with fur along the spine and tail ridges with a puff at the bottom and the head. Bulky with lots of strength. Average claw strength and slightly above average bite. Lives in the jungle, uses their tail to swing from trees and stay attached while sleeping. Hangs upside down from the tail to sleep. Mostly herbivorous, but will eat small monkeys and similar mammals. Because I thought that was funny. And then we're on to Shoji, who the other dragons would call Spider. He would have a range of dark gray scales, 6 legs, horrifying but necessary, a long tail, about the size of an elephant, like boxy large wings, a large mouth, a long tongue, like think venom, no breath attack, and as a human, he would also retain long tongue, gross, but distinct, scales on his shoulders and along his limbs, and his horns. And yeah, like for all of these like dragon designs, I don't always specify that they have horns or like fluff. Just assume they do in some way, but it's more minor and, just generic dragon kind of vibe if not stated. Then we're on to Tokoyami, who the other dragons would call Raven. He's a fluffy little black thing, especially along the head like plumage, large black wings, yellow talons, shorter fur-covered tail. Shadow becomes like a 3D void dragon at will, Dark Shadow. No breath attack, and about the size of a polar bear. Dark Shadow, like when Tokoyami's in his human form, Dark Shadow does appear more dragon-like, and Tokoyami actually has scales under his eyes between his feathers, and like horns hidden in his head feathers. And he would be a cavern dragon. This is the last like dragon, the typing description I have. And so yeah, bird-like dragons that are all black except for ridges of red scales around their neck and limbs. Their snout is more beak-like and a yellow color. Shorter teeth. Tails are shorter and have long fur coming off with fur-covered wings that muffles the sound of their flying. Not fast flyers, but quiet. Flocks live in wide open caves. And I wrote Mula caves, M-U-L-U. I'm assuming that's an actual type of cave I looked up. By forests. They are nocturnal and sleep in the dark cave during the day and go out to hunt in the dark forest at night. They mostly eat meat, but will also eat fruit when available. Can twist their shadows to be more intimidating, and it can lash out when the dragon is threatened. And then we're down to our last dragon design, which is Kura, who would be called Critter by the other dragons. He's a light bark brown, about the size of an elephant. No breath attack. His breath attack would just be hypnotizing animals with his roar, similar to how Shinso's breath attack isn't really a breath attack. He's rocky looking, has stubby horns, large claws, and apparently I did not agree with my 3 points ago self about the elephant size, because I actually wrote at the end he's the size of like an extinct rhino size, which I guess is the bigger rhino, which fits with this probably smaller elephant, so same idea-ish. And so as a human, he would have the horns, claws, slit eyes, and some under eye / cheekbone scales. And that is the last of the dragons. But then we have Aizawa, who is the human pack leader. And the dragons would call him sire. Like, I think it's animals or just like, the dad animals, the sire. So, I love Dadzawa. I include it wherever I can. So yeah, he's the human pack leader. He's so small. He has 20 pieces of jewelry with a scale from each of his dragon children. He's the only person who can control them when their instincts flare up. Just picture 20 dragons sleeping in a pile around this man. And that is what I wrote like that. That's not just me rambling. But yeah, always got to include Dadzawa whenever possible. And it is really funny. Just like in fanon, he's always complaining about his demon children. But in this universe, they're literal dragons. And he's just like standing there like, this is my life. Stop, but get that out of your mouth. Stop chewing on that. Why are you doing that? This poor man. I'm tormenting him. Anyway, that is all for the character designs. But yeah, I had a lot of fun coming up with those. And like, I didn't push myself to complete everything when this happened, which, is how you should do it if it's just, casual, fun idea. Because it should be casual and fun, not stressful. Just write whatever you feel like it. And yeah, this wasn't all in one sitting. I think I came back over like the course of a few days just to write down more when I came up with ideas. I let it marinate for a bit. But, eventually, evidently, I just put it down and walked away. And it was fun. Spun it around in my head for a few days, all those lovely little ideas. And then that was it. But we are on, finally, to the outline, which is more of a, like, how you might, write out. Well, I guess it is how I wrote out what would happen in a story. Like before, this was my writing process. I would write basically what would happen, just not in prose. So that is what this is. And that it's a good chunk. How much is it? First chunk is 2,000. Oh, it's 2,200 words. And second chunk is like 15,000 words. My God, this is already so long. I don't think anyone's gonna listen to this whole thing. And this isn't even one of, I guess it's not super long. Of the like candidates that I've outlined for potential me reading about my fic ideas. So this one's 6,000. Another one is 8,000, which that one does have like a few chapters written out. So that's probably, it's 2 chapters written out. So that's probably why it's so long. But then another one is 5,000. Very short one is just 700, which it's a different thing that it's more rambling about a genre or type of fic idea. And another one's 2,000. Then we've got more into my recent ones. I love it. It's 12,600 words, that one. Then I've got a 2,001, 4,001, 901, and then one that I'm actually currently fixated on. How long is it now? 16,001. That's fun. Anyway, so yeah, this isn't anywhere close to the longest one, though I guess it is longer than average. I don't know why I decided to start with this one. But, and yeah, word-wise, I'm like halfway through, more than halfway. How long is this again? 6,000. And I got none less than halfway through, and I'm already like an hour in. I appreciate if you've stuck around with me, like recording this. I'm going to just get on with it now, I guess. I'm going to start with the outlines, so yes. Enjoy, I hope you do. It's been a month. A long month, but they finally found them. Some trusted underground and Twilight heroes were made aware to be on the lookout, and it paid off, eventually noticing people and trucks coming in and out of a supposedly abandoned building while searching the area. UA is mobile within a day to strike a raid. They've been keeping this quiet, so they've only got 1 or 2 trusted heroes alongside them. Fat Gum with Amajiki and Miss Joke. They don't know what to expect. They can't afford to spook them and send them fleeing with their missing students in tow. With his missing students in tow. Ones he'd barely had for a week before they were gone. Out of his grasp and on their way to school. They arrive at the abandoned IKEA. It's a massive one, a project they undertook decades ago that was too big to keep running, so had to be shut down. A disgruntled employee had triggered the sprinklers before they left, and the water was only discovered a week later, after it had been too late. Water damage and black mold had set in, and the place had been condemned. The area around it had been deteriorating, but that pushed it over the edge, and it had become yet another ghost town in Japan, perfectly out of the way and massive enough to house 20 students. They'd been given the old floor plans, and the place was built like a maze. Luckily, they had Nezu on their side. Given he built his school to be a maze, it was safe to say he was good with them. Small teams were infiltrating from all sides of the building. Aizawa was with Mike and Nezu riding on his shoulders. They slunk in through an old emergency exit and into the dark building. There were no windows, so it was no surprise that they had to pull out flashlights. What was a surprise was that after a few minutes and wandering deeper into the bowels, light appeared. The overhead lights were on. The two heroes put away their flashlights. If that wasn't proof that people were here, he didn't know what was. But still, there was no one there. Mike joked that they'd gone home for the weekend. They continued creeping when they heard a noise. It sounded like claws clinking against linoleum floors. The three tensed and crept cautiously around the next bend. That's when they saw it. Presumably sneaking through the halls was a dragon, green and fluffy and big, probably the size of a small polar bear big. It was having trouble being stealthy, as its long tail constantly hit against things, wrapping around them for a moment before letting go, plus the clack of nails on the ground. Mike whisper radioed the team that they had a dragon, but it seems that he was too loud, as the dragon whipped its head around, eyes blown wide with fear. Its face was covered with little brown scales that looked like freckles, and its emerald eyes were narrowed into slits. It growled, frozen in place. Aizawa was like, "What do we do?" Nezu, being Nezu, and also an animal, has a spot of intuition about the creature in front of him, and the scent coming off them. So he says they should corner it and gently subdue it, calling for Midnight to join them. Her quirk doesn't work on animals, but dragons aren't real animals, so this has to be a person. One of the villain's quirks, most likely. Aizawa activates his quirk. Quirks like this were tricky. There was a chance it could be a full mutation quirk, and they always look like this. But he doubts it. If it's a transformation quirk, there's a 50% chance that looking at them will change them back to normal, and a 50% chance that they'll be unable to shift forms. The dragon does not shrink. First, getting an even more panicked look on their face at the loss of their quirk, before something like recognition draws on their features. They look between the three of them, letting out a muttering chitter, before they take off running. Aizawa is like, "Shit!" and they scramble after them. Their long body twists around corridors with ease. The dragon would easily lose them, if not for it stopping every once in a while and looking back at them, like it didn't want them to lose it. Aizawa doesn't know what was going on, but a sinking feeling was growing in his gut. One of wrongness, unnaturalness, like something wasn't how it was meant to be. Powerloader's team radios that they found a room that looks like to be a large lab. They're looking for information as they speak, him on the computer. Nezu's grip tightens on Aizawa's shoulders. Ahead of them, they hear a distressed squawk, and when the dragon comes into view, it's cornered itself in a dead end. Them in front, and a human-sized employee door behind. There's something distressing about how panicked those wide green eyes are. They look so young. Mike tries to calm them as they creep closer, speaking softly and saying that they won't hurt them. Nothing seems to register on the creature's face, so Aizawa doubts it understands. As they get within 20 meters of it, there's a sudden shift. The dragon shrinks smaller and smaller, too small to be an adult. Aizawa's gut twists, but as soon as they're fully human, he activates his quirk to stop them from transforming back. The two pros are rushing forward, but they're too far. Wide, green, human eyes and a familiar face stare back at them, with feral fear and a spattering of freckles that look a little too much like scales, before they slip through the door, letting it close behind them. Aizawa swears. There's a sound on the other side, and when they get through, they're in a warehouse, and a dragon is climbing up to the top of the shelves and hurrying off into the warehouse. Aizawa is about to swing up after the boy, his student, before Powerloader's strained voice sounds on the comms. He's like, "You guys are gonna want to hear this." He says that he's found documents going back years about quirk experiments, about giving people new quirks. They've seemingly perfected an artificial quirk that they could make multiples of 6 months ago. Vlad is like, "That's impossible. You can't make a quirk." Powerloader is like, "These documents say otherwise, and they have files on all of our missing students. There's a note about, if they're strong enough for UA, they should be strong enough for the procedure." Midnight gasps in horror at the words, but she asks if they're too late. Powerloader says they're alive, but... Then Aizawa says, "The dragon we were chasing earlier switched to a human to get through the door." There was no doubt that it was Midoriya Izuku. Powerloader grimaces audibly. How does one grimace audibly? Anyway, it seems like their students have been given this dragon quirk. But more concernedly, these people are keeping them on some drug they've designed. Mike is like, "What kind of drug?" as they walk quickly through the open warehouse space, keeping an eye out and an ear out for Midoriya. Powerloader's like, "As you know, many quirks come with animal instincts. It seems that this trigger-based serum keeps those instincts heightened, blocking out most coherent thought." Mike is like, "Shit." It makes sense, though. Midoriya had really looked feral, and what kind of captured kid ran away from heroes? The kid didn't seem to recognize them at all until Aizawa used his quirk. The feeling must have been familiar enough from the quirk apprehension test to spark that little bit of recognition that had Midoriya waiting for them as he ran. Nezu, with a tight voice, is like, "Does it say where they currently are?" And the answer is no. They wander more before they hear a noise. They wonder if it's the people who fucking experimented on kids, but they look up and see Midoriya, animalistic eyes studying them, before he leaps from the top of the shelves and glides to the next, looking back at them. Aizawa exchanges glances with Mike before they're off after their student. Vlad comes on comms and is like, "I think I found the weekend guards." Hound Dog, who's with Powerloader, asks what happened. Vlad is like, "Some guy named Jeff's birthday party happened." Ectoplasm says there's about 20 people passed out from alcohol. Snipe just comments on the cake. There's a sound of Vlad hitting his hand away. They say they'll secure them for questioning. Aizawa and Mike walk out from behind a shelf and freeze at what's in front of them. The Murray radios that she's almost there, and Mike says good, because they're going to need her. In front of them are all 20 of their students. All but Midoriya are chained to the wall, thick manacles around their necks held in place by long chains, long enough for the kids to snuggle up against their neighbors. There's an obvious 20th spot, but broken chains lay on the ground. He looks closer at Midoriya's fur-covered neck and notices some rusty spots that probably aren't natural. The feral dragons panic at the sight of them, but Midoriya lets out a rumbling noise, and the pack seems to calm down. One of the dragons seems to respond to them. A large dragon nearly the size of an elephant, with a mix of night-black scales and bright orange ones. They seem to rumble back and forth, Midoriya shrinking back a little bit. Another dragon, this one a split of white and red scales, growls at the black and orange one. The pack of dragons talked amongst themselves. When Midoriya arrives, they're still seemingly debating something, so they don't notice. She's looking at them in a mixture of awe and sadness. She asks what the plan is. They turn to Nezu. He says that they must get them back to UA, where they can wean them off the drug. Mike says it's a good plan, but how do they get them there? Midoriya is like, shouldn't they be going to a hospital? Some whack jobs experimented on them. Aizawa says, we're trying to keep this discreet, remember? Now, probably more than ever. I doubt these kids want everyone to know what happened to them. Nezu says, Recovery Girl and her team are more than capable of handling things. And if they aren't, Nezu can call in some people who owe him favors. Aizawa resists the urge to shudder. You never want to owe the rat a favor. That's what made him start teaching at UA in the first place. Sure, he loves his job now, but being a teacher was never in his plans, and he had to be dragged there like a cat to the vet. Mike is back on how they're getting them there. Nezu is like, Quirk suppressants should reverse them back to their human form, unlike Aizawa's quirk. And Mike is like, you think they'll sit long enough for us to give them some? Plus, we don't have any. Nezu says not to worry. That as soon as Power Loader confirmed his suspicions, he messaged Naomasa to bring them 20 doses, plus extra. As much as it pains him to say, he believes that the only way to administer it is if Midnight knocks them out with her quirk first. The heroes all have masks due to Midnight being on the mission, and all the dragons but Midoriya can't move. She grimaces, but if it's the only way... They secure the masks, and Midoriya rips her sleeves. A pink mist fills the air. The growled conversation stops, as all the dragons' noses twitch, and their gaze turns to them. Aizawa's heart aches to see the fear in their gaze, when the first one of them slumps. A smaller, wingless, aquatic-looking dragon. Asui, perhaps? The pink wingless one next to them, Mina? Uraraka? Noses them with a distressed cry. The dual-colored one is struggling against their bonds, trying to get closer to the downed dragon. The black and orange-scaled one is thrashing in their bond to attack Nem, but the chains hold, and one by one the dragons slump. Aizawa doesn't know how his heart takes the sight of Midoriya, winding through the increasingly downed bodies of the students, desperately trying to nose them awake. Pained cries that tear at his heart emerging from his small form. When he's the only one left conscious, he stands in front of the group protectively. His fur is puffed up, and he's snarling in a desperately feral way. But he can't last for long, and as the consciousness is draining from his eyes, he meets Aizawa's gaze. And God, he feels like he might throw up. There's so much hurt in those eyes. And there's also betrayal. Aizawa doesn't think the teens can understand what they're saying right now, so from Midoriya's perspective, he led them to his captive friends, and they knocked them all unconscious. As his body hits the floor, he lets out a desperate keen. When Nezu climbs down from his shoulder, his ears are pinned back on his head. He's clearly distressed. He puts a paw on Midoriya's snout, saying, We'll take care of them, and we'll make sure the people who did this pay. This time, Aizawa can't suppress the shudder. And that is the first chunk, which I guess was Aizawa's POV. But yeah, this outline is how I used to outline for writing fics. I haven't actually actively made like an outline in a little bit, so I don't know if I've just stopped doing it or I've changed how I do it, but this is how I used to do it. It's basically a story, but just not written in prose. And painfully, basically all of the conversation, all the speech is a character is like, and then Mike is like, and then Nezu is like, because I don't actually want to write out like quotations because that feels like I'm writing actual dialogue when it's just supposed to be It's the outline. It's just supposed to be generally what the theme is. The actual words can come later. It's just the progression of plot and the feelings, which are important. And like sometimes if, inspiration is hit and it'll be extra like zhuzhed up, but it doesn't need to be for the outline. That's how I used to do it. I don't think I really do that as much anymore. But again, I haven't actively written much outlines in recent times because for Drifting Through the Cosmos, the last couple of months that I was writing for it, it was really just sit down, have 1 or 2 bullet points on what I want to happen, go into a fugue state and write it all, hopefully before midnight strikes. So I don't actually have recommendations currently for how I've changed and what works better that way. But this is how I used to do it, and it worked. I don't think it was the best way to do it, but it did work. And it does make it fun to go back and read old fic ideas because you can really get an idea of what the story would have looked like written out. But it is just the beginning, which I guess is part of the main issue when not really writing out a lot of brainstormy bits. It's when it's more like the beginnings of a plot and not like themes, what the beginning and end might look like. It's more focused on the beginning, which can make it harder to turn it into an actual story. If you're trying to write an actual story, just focusing on the beginning, for me, is a really good way to burn out quickly. Because it is fun, but it's not going anywhere. You can't see it going anywhere. There's plenty of ideas like, okay, this is an AU where they're dragons, but how does that affect the rest of the story? Is it just everything's the exact same, but they're dragons and that doesn't really affect the plot? It can be difficult to actually carry on. But just on its own, if this is just a shorter story where it's just this beginning bit, which is not how I planned it out to be. I can't stop myself from planning out super long fics, but if it is just the beginning bit, it's interesting enough. It doesn't need to have a whole overarching story if it's just supposed to be a fun thought piece about what this could look like. Anyway, that's enough rambling about that paragraph. On to this. I do say paragraph because again, it's just commas. There are no periods. Save me. Anyway, on to the second one, which is from Midoriya's perspective of the events that just occurred, basically. He was running through the maze that was the bad people's den. His claws, made for climbing trees and walking on plush forest floors, clacked uncomfortably on the hard floor, but he kept going. He could feel his neck bleeding sluggishly, but he kept going. He had to find them. Find who? He wasn't sure. It was just an itch in the back of his brain that he was in trouble. His flock was in trouble, and there were people who were supposed to help when they were in trouble. And his flock needed help. The bad people had locked them up. He was locked up, but his power was far stronger than the bad people thought, and he'd been able to get out. There were less people on some days, and he'd waited for one of those before breaking out. He tried to use his power to free the others, but he wasn't good enough. He couldn't do it, so he needed help. If only he could remember what that help looked like. He panted and slowed to a walk. He was deep in the maze at that point. While he could make it back to his flock, he couldn't seem to find a way out. He didn't want one of the remaining bad people to find him before he could get help. Suddenly, he heard a voice from behind him. He whipped his head around to see 2 people and a thing. Terror of being found, prey, coursed through his mind. But then a new sensation interrupted that. It was an odd emptiness he'd never felt before. The rolling ball of energy that lived in his chest suddenly snuffed out, and the thread he could pull to change forms melted away into mist. Being powerless should have made him panic, but instead, a blurry memory pulled itself to the front of his mind. Determination, his power sparking through his body. Then, blankness, and red, glaring eyes. A page full of details about the man and his power. a power that took away other people's powers. The page, that was in a book about the people, the ones that were supposed to help. He looked closer at the other man. His banana hair brought another page to his mind's eye, along with him standing in front of a podium. Even the furry thing jolted a memory. These were what he was looking for. They were supposed to help. He needed to bring them back so they could help. So he ran back towards his flock, all the while the help people followed. They were slow and small, so he had to be slow with them and wait for them to follow. But they followed. He panicked a little when he was met with a small door. The only way he could get through was to change, but he didn't want to. His other form was small and weak, and even though the help people were there were bad people here too. He wasn't safe. He wanted to stay big, but as the help people closed in, he had to change. He felt the same emptiness as the string vanished into the air, and the energy fizzled out again. But once he was beyond the door, the sensations rushed back. He tugged the string immediately, and he grew, a feeling of safety coming over him. He ran towards the nearest tall shelf and climbed up to the top. He watched as the help people came through. They were close. They could help. But first, he needed to tell his pack. So he ran to the end of the tall shelf and jumped, taking flight. He swooped down next to his flock. There were rumbles of greeting, of Bush. That's what the others called him, since the other name he knew he had was hidden behind fog. Even though he knew he was only away for a few minutes, he twined between bodies, nuzzling them as he went. He told them that he'd found help, that help was coming, but it had small legs, so it was taking a while. Frostburn tried to ask him something, a hesitant note to his voice, but Bush was already skittering away and up the metal trees. He glided between them, listening for the help. It wasn't hard to pick up on them and then get close to them. His claws clacked on the metal trees, and the help looked up. He guides them closer to his flock, stopping and looking back to make sure the help is following. When it does, he carries on. It's not long until he can see his flock, and he glides down, chirping excitedly. Blast growls and demands to know why Bush thinks what he's found is help and not hurt. Bush bristles. He goes to explain, but the reason is stuck in the fog. He deflates a little with a glare. He says it's a fog feeling. They all have these things lost in the fog that come out sometimes. Blast narrows his eyes and says that it's not enough. Bush's tail flicks. Just then, footsteps echo close, and the rest of the flock turns to the help, on edge, some growling and baring teeth in warning. Bush lets out a calming rumble, reminding them that they are help. Blast doesn't relax. He says that Bush led new hurt to them. Bush shrinks away at the implication that he endangered his flock. He says that they are help. The fog says so. Blast gets more worked up, drawing up to his full height. Frostburn growls at Blast, snapping at him to be nice to Bush. That if the fog said it was true, they should trust it. Ebony is like, not doubting you, Bush, but the fog has been wrong before. We need to be careful. Float says, stop attacking Bush. He's the only one who's doing anything. Charge says, would if I could, but I can't. Flicker pouts that not everyone is as strong as Bush. Blast snarls that Bush isn't meant to be that strong, that his species can only run and hide, not fight. Haze is like, well, he is, and he's the only chance we have at escape. Raven says, so we may revel in the true dark. Then, a sweet floral scent snaps into focus. Everyone turns to the source of the smell. A page brushes up against Bush's mind. More help. But before it can come into focus, Algae slumps to the ground, unmoving. Icy cold horror more frigid than anything Frostburn can make, crystallizes in his veins. He can't look away as Float nudges Algae without reaction, calling out her name before her eyes close and she falls next to her. They're not moving. The sweet smell. Alarm bells rang in his head, but it was too late. More and more of his flock were succumbing to the gas. They weren't moving. Were they dead? Had he killed them? Was Blast right, and he led more hurt to the flock, and they had killed them? His usually whirring mind was blank with horror. The ones not down yet were struggling, Blast trying to attack the source of the sweet smell, but the chains held him back, digging deeper into the flesh where scale had been rubbed away. A sound from Frostburn struggling against his chain, trying to reach the others, jolts him from his frozen state. He runs forward to Algae and Float, trying to wake them. They don't move. He moves on to Acid and Charge next to them. Then Shimmer, then Haze, then Raven, then Swing and Impact and Boulder and Web and Tenor and Swift and Critter and Spider, and eventually Frostburn and Blast when they too fall. Nothing he does helps. As he's begging Blast to wake up, he sees movement in the corner of his eye. But it's no one from his flock. It's the hurt he brought his flock. He snarls, despite how he shakes, despite the mist swirling in his head. He flares his wings and his tail thrashes and he bares his teeth, standing between the new hurt and his flock. He has to protect them. They can't be gone. He just needs to... His eyes shift to the one that brings the empty, the one that was supposed to help, the one he trusted his flock with. He looks into those black eyes, and the mist takes him. And that is the end of everything I've written out for this fic, but I do have more to say. But yeah, that is the second bit from Izuku's POV, which I think is very fun. But one thing that I am sure of is when I was writing this. So as you can see at the beginning, I do not use any name for Izuku. It's just he, him pronouns. And suddenly when you get to the flock, we're referring to him as Bush. And I'm pretty sure is because when I was writing this, it was a stream of consciousness outline. Like I said, most of these things were stream of consciousness, not the best planning wise. But so when I got to him being back with the flock, I had to debate with myself, do I want them to use their normal names? What names do I want them to use? Would they remember them? And I decided that no, they wouldn't remember them. So then there was the question of how do they refer to each other? Which probably promptly led me to going back to the character section and coming up with a name for each of the dragons. And it's fine where its placement is, but if I was actually writing this out, I would probably move some of that to the beginning. So right at the beginning where Izuku's wandering around thinking about, forest and stuff, but before he runs into Aizawa, Nezu, and Mike, I would have him, refer to himself in his head by Bush, which, the audience is like, why is he doing that so promptly? Mental narration would explain the whole thing about how, the fog that they have in their brains, they can't remember stuff, and that's they came up with things to refer to each other as. That would be a better placement, but because of the way this idea was outlined and all that, it isn't present where it probably should be, which is why I have changed my process for brainstorming, because this is honestly more brainstorming than it is a proper outline, but that is basically what my outlines were. They were just as it came to me and not well planned out. And it is fine if it's just for fun. It's, casual stuff. But I love optimization and organization. So it didn't work for me. And eventually I found something that did work better. But I'd have to read out one of my, I guess, other outlines for you to get a better idea of that. Or I do have a little writing kit that I don't actually know if I've ever posted it anywhere. I've shared the links to people who have asked about how I write stuff. I think the writing kit maybe was shared under the 100th chapter of Drifting Through the Cosmos. It might have been one of the extras I did. But anyway, I've updated it as I've updated my formatting document, and I have a whole typed out explanation of my writing flow. So I'm probably am going to record at least a few more of me reading over some old fic ideas I've had, even though I don't know how many people will be at the end listen all the way through. But I had fun at least, so I'm probably going to do maybe 2 more, and there'll be one there, but probably I might release them all at once. I don't know how any of this is going, but if anyone is actually listening to this and still around, please let me know any suggestions you have for what you liked, what maybe you didn't like about how this was formatted. Not about the fic content. That is, you'd have to go back in time and talk to me a few years ago who actually was writing this and cared. But at this point, yeah, I really don't. And anyone can use any ideas or inspiration they got from this to write whatever they want. Honestly, you can copy it basically, and turn it into proper prose or whatever. But if that's the case, I would appreciate being credited. But if it's just light inspiration, you don't even have to. This is for, the main purpose of this is A, sharing some ideas of mine that are never going to see the light of day, but I think are fun. B, sharing some of my writing process and just thoughts about the writing process and any tips I can think of. And then C, hopefully just being the kind of content that does get your imagination going and thoughts running, overly sarcastic productions, their Red's trope talk series. It always just gets my brain whirring with stuff. And even if it's not specifically about things that were talked about in video, it gets you into that writing mood set. So that is something that hopefully this does, if not just be something entertaining. But yeah, I think that is all I have to say about this. I will have the link to a copy of the document that I've been reading out that has all of this stuff in it if you want to check it out. Again, give any suggestions for things you liked, things you didn't. Maybe if I have something more of an outline or chapters, if you'd prefer that to be read at the beginning versus the end. Anything, any feedback would be great. But yeah, if anyone's still listening, this is really out there, experimental, I guess. I did not come into this with any sort of script. Maybe I should have, but it is just a fun little experiment I guess I'm doing to see if I liked it, and I did like it. So the next one I do will probably be a bit more structured. Anyway, that is all for this time. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me ramble about this fic and the writing process. But that is all for this time. I will see you guys next time.